I grew up in a tan split-level house on Maple Ridge Lane, just outside Seattle. From the street, it looked perfect, a neat little picture of American suburban life. But if you stood in the hallway long enough, you'd notice something strange. The door frames leaned slightly to the left. My mother, Marla, said it gave the place charm. I thought it told the truth. Nothing inside that house ever stood straight. My sister, Sophie, was the light that filled every room, and I was the shadow that followed quietly behind. She was 2 years older, but treated me like a servant. When she sang, everyone clapped. When she cried, everyone rushed to comfort her. The world bent itself around her, even the air in our kitchen. When I brought home a small ribbon from a regional coding competition, my mother smiled and said, "That's cute, honey. Let your sister have the bigger slice of cake. She has a big audition tomorrow." Sophie missed the audition, blamed the weather, and was rewarded with a new pair of shoes. My father, Graham, worked long hours at a shipping company near the port. He wasn't cruel, just absent in the way men often are when silence feels easier than confrontation. On weekends, he handed Sophie small bills from his wallet, as if they were proof of his affection. For me, he saved polite nods. When he did talk to me, it was about grades, never about dreams. The first time I learned to code, I was 12. Our school library had an outdated computer lab, but I didn't care. I loved the hum of old processors, the glow of the screen. My first project was simple, a chore tracker that assigned points and rewards. I thought my family would be proud. Sophie clicked through it, wrinkled her nose, and said, "It's ugly." My mother patted my shoulder and said, "You should take piano instead." I didn't argue. I just kept building. By the time I turned 15, I had a secret world that lived inside my laptop. While Sophie practiced monologues in front of her mirror, I watched online tutorials from developers in New York, Chicago, and London. I started selling small scripts and design templates to people I met in coding forums. $5 here, 10 there, it wasn't much, but it was mine. I kept every dollar in a separate account I opened without telling anyone. That account felt like a locked door in my chest, one they couldn't break through. Sophie failed her driver's test twice. My mother blamed the instructor. When she dropped out of community college after one semester, they said she was too creative for structure. Every one of her failures became a family project, funded with excuses and sympathy. My successes were brushed off as accidents, the result of luck or obsession. Our house leaned a little more each winter. The roof creaked every time it rained, like it wanted to sigh, but didn't know how. My mother said we needed a new deck. She convinced my father to take out a small loan, saying it would raise the property value. When the deck was finished, Sophie threw a party for her friends and posted pictures captioned, "Future Hollywood Star." The next morning, I cleaned up the red cups and confetti, listening to her snore upstairs. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks that spidered across the plaster. I promised myself I would one day build a life where everything stood straight. No tilted frames, no crooked love, no false praise. High school ended quietly. I graduated with honors, but no one came to the ceremony. Sophie had a big audition, and my parents drove her to Portland for it. I walked home in my cap and gown, stopping for ice cream on the way. I still have the photo I took that day, me smiling on a park bench, holding a single scoop cone in one hand and my diploma in the other. It was the first time I realized pride didn't need an audience. College was my escape. I got a small scholarship to study computer science at the University of Washington. I packed my bags 2 days before classes started. My mother cried at the door, saying she'd miss me terribly, then handed me a list of things Sophie might need while I was gone. I smiled, hugged her, and left without looking back. Campus life was noisy and free. I found part-time work at a coffee shop and spent late nights in the computer lab writing code until my fingers cramped. For the first time, people saw me for what I could do, not what I lacked. By senior year, I had built a small portfolio of apps, budget trackers, fitness logs, even a mental health journal that synced with Google Calendar. None of them went viral, but each line of code felt like a step towards solid ground. When I graduated, I moved into a tiny studio apartment on Capitol Hill. The rent was steep, $1,350 a month, but the first night I slept there, I didn't hear anyone call me second best. The air was quiet, the walls straight, and the floor didn't creak. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about that house on Maple Ridge Lane. I wondered if the deck still stood, or if the wood had warped from the rain. I thought about Sophie, probably spinning new dreams with someone else's money. But I didn't feel bitter anymore. I felt distance, clean and safe, like standing on the other side of a window and watching a storm fade. That was when I began writing my own story, not just in code, but in the choices I made. Every file I saved was a small declaration. I will not tilt. I will not bend to fit the shape of their love. It would take years before that promise led me to build something that changed everything. But even then, I could feel it forming, quiet and sure, beneath the hum of my laptop, the foundation of a life that finally stood level. At 24, I moved into a small studio apartment on Capitol Hill. The space was barely 400 square feet, with creaky floors and a single window that overlooked a narrow alley, but to me, it felt like a fortress. The rent, $1,350 a month, was steep for my salary, but I didn't care. Every night when I locked the door behind me, I could breathe without judgment or comparison. No one was waiting to tell me that Sophie's dreams mattered more than mine. My day job was modest. I worked as a support technician for a small software firm downtown. The hours were long, the pay was average, and the office coffee tasted like cardboard, but the job gave me something my childhood home never did: structure. After work, I came home, ate instant noodles, and sat in front of my secondhand laptop, writing code until midnight. That's when I noticed a pattern. Many of our firm's small business clients struggled with inventory management. They constantly emailed asking for ways to sync their physical store sales with their online listings. It seemed simple, but no one had built a smooth solution for them. That problem became my obsession. I started building a tool that would sync sales automatically across platforms and send polite, human-like notifications when stock was low. By the end of 6 months, my living room looked like a data center. Wires everywhere, monitors glowing through the night, energy drink cans stacked like trophies. The app worked, but I didn't want my real name attached to it. I was tired of people underestimating me before they even tried my work. So I created a new identity, Ardenvale. I picked the name because it sounded calm, almost elegant. It didn't scream ambition. It whispered capability. I registered the domain, built a simple website, and listed the product at $18 per month. I didn't expect much. Within 3 weeks, 10 people signed up, then 50, then 200. By month 6, I had 2,000 paying customers. Boutique owners from Portland, Chicago, and even Toronto sent thank you emails. One woman from New York attached a photo of a black dress she'd finally kept in stock for the first time in months. I printed that message and taped it above my desk. It wasn't just a note, it was proof that my work had value, even if my family never saw it. Meanwhile, Sophie's life took another dramatic turn. She quit her job at a salon, claiming it stifled her creativity. Then she launched a luxury handmade clothing line out of Los Angeles. My mother called me constantly, her voice full of rehearsed worry. "She just needs one good break," Marla said one night. "Can you lend her $6,000? She's trying to rent a studio space." I paused, my eyes fixed on the glowing lines of code on my screen. "I wish I could help," I said softly, "but I can't." There was silence, the kind that stretches thin and cold. Then she sighed. "Your sister is special, dear. One day you'll see that." I ended the call and went back to my code. 2 years later, Ardenvale was earning over $1 million in annual revenue. The app had grown beyond my expectations. I hired 2 remote developers, both under fake names, to keep the illusion alive. I didn't want anyone tracing Arden back to me. I'd seen too many people dismissed the second they realized a young woman had built something powerful. That same year, I bought a small craftsman home in Ballard for $780,000. It had clean beams, a white porch, and a garden that caught the morning sun. I paid for a new roof, repainted the walls myself, and installed a locked cabinet where I kept old journals, backup drives, and the first printed invoices of my company. I never shared the address with my family. It wasn't bitterness, it was protection. I loved them, but they drained every spark they touched. Whenever I gave, they took twice as much. I needed this one part of my life untouched, unspoiled. Then came Ethan Cole. He was an investor from San Francisco, one of those men who wore tailored suits but spoke like he'd just come from a beach run. He'd heard about Arden Vale through a contact and asked to meet. When he arrived, he looked around my living room, clearly surprised by its simplicity. "You built all this alone?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded, leaning forward. "I want to buy in. $6 million for a minority stake." My stomach tightened. $6 million. I could pay off my house, expand the team, maybe even slow down. But something in me hesitated. I'd spent my whole life watching others make decisions for me. My mother for love, Sophie for pity. I didn't want to sell control, not now. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not interested." He smiled faintly. $9 million, then. "And I'll open doors for you in London and Chicago. You could triple your user base." I looked around at my house, the plants I kept alive, the quiet hum of my server, the framed photo of that boutique owner's thank you note. Every part of it had been built from silence and self-reliance. "I still have to say no," I told him. "I like my freedom more than expansion." Ethan studied me for a long moment, then stood. "Not big," he said, glancing at the house, "but every line is true." When he left, I sat by the window and watched his car disappear down the street. The world outside was still moving fast, startups rising and falling, people chasing money or fame. I had something else. I had peace that came from ownership, from knowing every inch of what I built was mine alone. That night, I made tea, sat at my desk, and opened my code editor. A small notification popped up. One of my oldest users had just renewed their subscription for the third year in a row. I smiled. Arden Vale wasn't just a company anymore. It was a mirror of who I had become, a woman who no longer needed permission to succeed. I didn't crave their approval anymore. My worth was finally detached from their recognition. I closed my laptop and looked around the quiet house. It wasn't grand or glamorous, but it stood straight. Every line, every wall, every frame was level. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to explain my success to anyone. I just needed to live it. It was a stormy Tuesday evening when the call came. The sky outside my office window was bruised with dark clouds, and thunder rolled over the sound like an old memory shaking itself awake. I almost didn't answer when I saw my mother's name flash across the screen, but something in me, habit, maybe, made me pick up. She didn't say hello. Her voice came sharp and desperate. "We need your help," she said. No greeting, no pause. Just that. Sophie's business had collapsed again. Another dream turned to dust. The investors she'd bragged about? Gone. The studio she'd rented in Los Angeles? Locked. The total debt $45,000, not counting the interest that was growing like fungus. My parents had covered her before, moving money from credit cards to loans, but this time they were drowning. The bank had sent a notice for the Maple Ridge house. If they missed one more payment, the home I grew up in would slip from their hands. I listened quietly while rain lashed against my window. My mother's voice cracked in places I'd never heard before. "She just needs time," she said. "She's your sister. Family helps family." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the framed quote on my office wall, a gift I'd bought myself when my company hit its first million. Freedom has a price. Pay it once, or pay forever. Finally, I said, "Let's meet. Dinner tomorrow." The restaurant was small and quiet, a lakeside place with candles on every table and the smell of grilled salmon in the air. I arrived early, wearing a blue sweater and tying my hair back so I wouldn't fidget. When they walked in, I could tell by their faces that the conversation had already begun before I got there. My mother sat tall, her hands clasped tightly on her purse, as if it held her last piece of pride. My father's hair had thinned more than I remembered, and there were deep shadows under his eyes. Sophie, of course, looked untouched by any of it, her nails manicured, her dress pale and expensive-looking. She gave me a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. We ordered, though none of us were hungry. My mother started speaking before the waiter even left. "We're not asking for charity," she said softly. "Just a little help. We'll pay you back when things settle." I stayed quiet, letting her words flow past me like waves breaking against rocks. My father tried to sound reasonable, explaining interest rates, the market, and how the bank had been unfair. Then Sophie spoke. "You've done so well for yourself," she said, leaning forward. "You could fix this with one click. It's nothing to you." Her tone carried the same ease it always had, the assumption that my hard work was an endless resource for her to tap. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Slowly, I laid it flat between the salt shaker and the water glass. It was a printed check for exactly $45,000. The payee line read, "Lessons I bought alone." My father stared at it, confused. Sophie's face tightened. My mother reached for it, but I pressed a finger on the top edge and said, "This is the amount you owe. Here's my answer. Pay it with your gold." Marla blinked, her voice cutting like glass. "What gold?" I looked at her and said, "The gold you gave her every time she failed. The praise you paid her in advance. The rules you bent for her, the years you told me my wins didn't count. Melt that down. Settle your debt with that." The table went silent except for the clinking of silverware from nearby diners. Sophie laughed once, short and bitter. "You think you're better than us?" I shook my head. "No. I think I'm separate from you. That's different." My father let out a long breath and said my name like a plea, but it was too late for that. I had given enough of my piece to their chaos. I placed another paper beside the check, the restaurant bill, $187, and set down $200 in cash. "I've covered my share," I said quietly. "You can cover yours." Then I stood, slipped on my coat, and walked out into the rain. The night air was cold and clean. I felt the sting of wind against my face, but underneath it all, I felt lighter. For years, I'd carried the invisible weight of their expectations, their judgment, their silence. That night, for the first time, I set it down. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from my mother. By evening, there were 10. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sent one message: "I will not pay for your debts. Please stop calling." They didn't stop. My voicemail filled with my mother's soft-spoken guilt, my father's tired reasoning, Sophie's cold anger. Each message sounded like a verse from a song I'd heard all my life, the one where love was measured by sacrifice. 3 days later, a notice was posted on their mailbox. The Maple Ridge house was officially in pre-foreclosure. My mother left one final message that night. Her voice was steady, almost rehearsed. "If the house goes," she said, "our family goes." I played it twice, then deleted it. That evening, I sat on the porch of my Ballard home. The rain had stopped, and the last of the daylight stretched across the wet street, turning everything gold for a moment. I looked up at the roofline I'd paid to rebuild, straight, strong, honest. Every corner of that house stood firm, nothing tilted or leaning. For the first time, I slept without dreams. When morning came, I brewed coffee and opened my laptop. A new payment notification blinked on the screen, another month's worth of subscriptions from my users. Ardenvale was thriving, quiet, and constant. It was proof that structure could be built even from the ruins of neglect. As I sat there, sunlight warmed the side of my face. I thought of the girl who used to hide in her bedroom, building apps in secret while her family cheered for someone else. I thought of the uneven floors of that house on Maple Ridge, the way I'd learned to balance on tilted ground. Now I live on level floors. I owed that to myself. Some people measure success in dollars, others in applause. For me, success was silence, the kind that didn't ache, the kind that meant peace. I had spent half my life begging to be seen. That night at the restaurant, I realized I didn't need their eyes anymore. I had my own reflection, and for once, it was enough. The Maple Ridge house sold that spring for $392,000. My parents didn't tell me. It was a mutual acquaintance who mentioned it over coffee. When I checked online, I saw the real estate listing. Charming split level with recent upgrades. The photos showed a white exterior, new siding, and a perfectly even roofline. Someone had finally fixed what my family never could. My parents moved into a small rental near Tacoma. It had beige walls and no porch. My mother told mutual friends she liked the fresh start, though I knew it wasn't fresh, just smaller. Sophie returned to Los Angeles, her social media full of captions about rebirth and resilience. She called herself a creative entrepreneur, posting photos of beaches, brunches, and sunsets. The only thing missing from those pictures was accountability. I kept working. My life didn't change, and I liked it that way. I woke before dawn, wrote code, answered user emails, and tended to the small garden in front of my Ballard house. The peace was rhythmic, no interruptions, no demands, just quiet progress. I still ran Ardenvale from behind its invisible curtain. Nobody knew my name, and I preferred it that way. In July, a London retailer reached out with a partnership proposal worth £2.4 million over 3 years. I read the email twice to make sure it wasn't a scam. It wasn't. They wanted to integrate my platform into their chain of stores across Europe. I signed the agreement calmly, without the disbelief or trembling I used to feel when success knocked. I'd learned that steady hands make longer bridges than shaking ones. By autumn, I had hired 4 employees in New York and 1 in Denver. They didn't know the real person behind Ardenvale, just the professional mask I wore in meetings. It gave me comfort, privacy as protection. When journalists reached out, I declined every interview. I didn't want headlines. I wanted stability. One quiet Sunday, I drove past the old Maple Ridge house. The new owners had painted the door navy blue, trimmed the hedges, and added flower boxes under the windows. The house looked straight, almost proud, like a person who had gone through therapy and finally learned to stand tall. I parked across the street and sat there for a while. I thought about the girl who once lived there, the one who coded in secret, who begged to be seen, who believed love could be earned by achievement. I thought about how she'd grown up trying to fix the tilt of that house, as if it would fix the tilt of her family. And I thought about that dinner by the lake, when I'd finally said the word no with my full voice. People like to talk about freedom as if it's a ceremony, a ribbon you cut in front of cheering crowds. But the truth is quieter, lonelier. Freedom costs dinners where no one sits across from you. It costs birthdays without phone calls, and holidays where your phone stays silent. It costs nights when the quiet gets so heavy, it feels like air before a storm. Sometimes, I still feel that weight. I eat dinner alone at the small oak table by my kitchen window, listening to the wind sweep over the eaves. The silence isn't cruel, it's just honest. It doesn't pretend to love me conditionally. It doesn't demand repayment for existing. When I lock my doors at night, the house answers me with clean lines and calm stillness. Every corner, every beam holds. In the morning, the sunlight falls across the living room wall at a perfect angle. I stand there sometimes, coffee in hand, and think, this is what truth looks like when it finally stands straight. I built a company that pays its bills. I bought a home that tells the truth. I became the woman who kept her name, even when she needed another one to stay safe. If peace requires distance, I'll pay it. If quiet is the freedom tax, I'll keep paying that too. My mother once said Sophie was born to shine. Maybe she was. But I was born to build. The building doesn't glitter. It hums.
It repeats.
It endures. From far away, it looks like stillness, but up close it's motion, the kind that creates structure, not noise. It's a line of code that runs without error. It's a wall that meets the ceiling without a crack. It's the hum of a woman who finally stopped apologizing for being her own foundation. There are still moments when I think of them, when I drive past a diner that looks like the one from that last dinner, or when I see a sister and brother laughing together at the grocery store. Sometimes I wonder if Sophie ever realized what I did for her by walking away. Sometimes I hope she did. But mostly I let the thought pass. Closure doesn't always come with understanding. Sometimes it comes with distance. I used to think love meant saving people, even when it broke you. Now I know love can simply mean turning on the porch light for yourself when you come home. Every evening, I walk up the steps of my Ballard house, key in hand, and switch that light on. The beam doesn't flicker. The frame doesn't bend. That light greets me the same way every night, steady, patient, and unashamed. I step inside, take a deep breath, and feel something I never knew back on Maple Ridge Lane. Ownership, not of a house, but of myself. Freedom, it turns out, doesn't come from who finally sees you. It comes from learning you no longer need to be seen to exist fully. My worth isn't a favor, and it isn't up for negotiation. It's not written in anyone else's tone or tempered by anyone else's expectations. It's built, beam by beam, line by line, in a house that no longer leans. And every night when I close the door behind me, I whisper one quiet truth into the still air. I am finally home.